Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the 16-Bit Thief podcast. I am your host, Jake Melvin. Now, I might be showing my age a bit by saying this, but years ago, I was subscribed to the content delivery service GameTap. It was honestly pretty cool for what it was, as it gave access to so many different games and systems. Because Nintendo is notoriously stingy with their licenses, the only company I remember them getting access to their consoles for was Sega. But they did have an access to a plethora of titles and companies. Sega, SNK, Capcom, Activision, Midway, there were so many games available that you could just play them all endlessly. But one game in particular I remember playing quite a bit was Giga Wing. It was a frenetic vertical shooter with a unique reflect mechanic and an anime art style. The game followed 4 different pilots and their voyage to destroy the Medallion, a powerful entity which was the cause of various predicaments for humanity over the years. What was pretty unique about Giga Wing 2 was the fact that there were multiple endings available. If you beat the game in one foul swoop without using another credit, you would get the best possible ending. But if you used multiple credits, you'd get the bad ending. And if you played on 2 players, you'd get multiple endings if you mixed and matched with the different pilots, both good and bad.
Okay.
Later on in life, I tried to see if I could find out more information about the developers of this game. I found out that it was actually Takumi Corporation, a company that was formed after Toaplan's closure in 1994. Other companies that were formed after Toaplan's closure were Rising, Cave, and Gazelle, with Cave and Rising being arguably the most successful. Cave is best known for their Danmaku, or bullet hell type shooters, such as Progrir and Dodonpachi. Rising, on the other hand, is well known for a plethora of titles, including Armed Police Batrider, Battle Barcade, Battle Garega, and even fighting games such as the Tatsunoko vs. Capcom series and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Toaplan, on the other hand, was best known for making incredibly difficult games, such as Batsugun, Knuckle Bash, Grindstormer, Snow Bros, Tiger Heli, Twin Hawk, and even Zero Wing. Yes, that Zero Wing.
What you say?
Takumi Corporation disappeared around 2005 or so after the release of their believed final title, Giga Wing Generations. But their legacy lives on in many shoot-'em-up fans' hearts, with their games Giga Wing 1 and 2 and Mars Matrix being some of the finest shoot-'em-ups ever produced by any company ever. I always wanted to know more about the development behind these games, but I was unable to find anyone for the longest time. So, I reached out to the composer Yasushi Kaminishi to ask some questions I've always wanted to know about the game's development, and thankfully, he responded pretty quickly. Unfortunately, he only opted to do a text interview, so it'll just be me as a talking head. And while the answers are pretty short, they give me some information, and some information is better to work with than none at all. Firstly, Giga Wing 2 was a notably different aesthetic and approach from the first game, and the soundtrack reflects that. What exactly was the decision to change to a more classical wartime soundtrack? Thanks to switching over to the Sega Naomi hardware, Kaminishi had much more to work with. Sampling was a lot more lackluster on the CPS2 compared to the Naomi, and it gave him more free range to compose this music. Initially, however, Kaminishi had the music denied, as they stated that it needed to be more exciting and dramatic. However, Kaminishi argued that actually making it orchestraic was more dramatic, and thusly decided to stick with it. Second, Mars Matrix was more techno and electronic compared to Giga Wing in terms of soundtrack. What bands or musicians did you take influence from in making the soundtrack to it? Kaminishi said that at the time, he had an intoxication with digital heavy metal bands such as Ministry. He also listened to rave music as well, which helped influence the inorganic sound which was coming at the end of the century. Third, was the decision to add voices to the characters in Giga Wing 2 a technical choice because the Naomi had more processing power? Unfortunately, Kaminishi doesn't really remember that and said it might have been the producer. But he did say that Kei Tome is a great character artist and it might have been her decision. Fourth, where would you say that the Capcom and Takumi trilogy you worked on ranks for your all-time favorite works? Do you have a particular track you love the most? Kaminishi did say that his favorite work was probably Giga Wing 2, and his favorite track is actually the city theme, which is what you're hearing right now. Fifth, we know that Takumi Corporation disappeared after Giga Wing Generations, but were there ever plans to make any more games afterwards? Unfortunately, Takumi Corp did disband afterwards, and there were no plans. But he states that he still keeps in contact with one of the graphic designers, Kenichi Morioka. Kenichi Morioka went on to work in the anime industry, and has worked on titles such as Kill la Kill, Pop Team Epic, and even Kaguya-sama, Love is War. He also believes that the lead producer of Giga Wing 2, Makoto Maeda, later went on to work for Capcom, but unfortunately, he doesn't really remember. Well, that's really all I was able to ask, but again, I do want to thank composer Yasushi Kaminishi from Takumi Corporation for agreeing to do an interview, even if it was just text only. It really meant a lot to me that he was able to answer some questions I've always wondered about the people at Takumi. Hopefully someday I'll be able to find the development team and even ask them questions about stuff like the reflect mechanic, among other things. But be sure to join me for the next episode, in which I get to interview German development company Shinen about the seminal GBA game Iridian 2. Until next time, this is Jake, logging off.